I'm not shaking. I keep telling myself that standing here in the break room of the most prestigious law firm in Chicago, holding a mug of coffee that's gone completely cold, listening to my voicemail for the third time because I genuinely cannot believe what I just heard, my mother's voice. After 4 years of nothing. I'm 31 years old. I passed the bar on my first attempt. I'm a partner faster than anyone in this office's 30-year history, and the sound of her voice still does something to my stomach that I cannot explain and refuse to dignify. I set the month down. I press delete. And I think about how we got here. I grew up in a house in Columbus, Ohio, where the living room wall was basically a shrine. My parents had hung up every photograph, every ribbon, every certificate they could find, and almost none of them were mine. There was my brother Caden's Little League team photo from 2001, the one where he's missing a front tooth and holding a trophy that came from a participation ceremony, not a win. There was his first place ribbon from the county swim meet in 2004. His acceptance letter to Ohio State, framed in actual wood, hung between two windows like it was a piece of fine art. I remember standing in front of that wall when I was about 12, counting. I had gotten a perfect score on my 6th grade statewide math assessment. My teacher, Miss Ober, Powell, had called the house specifically to tell my parents that in 22 years of teaching, she had never seen a score like mine. My mother had said, "Oh, that's wonderful," and then asked if Caden had left his gym bag in the classroom. My certificate from that test was not on the wall. I asked my father about it once, just once. "That stuff is academic," he said, not looking up from the sports section. "Caden works hard for what he gets." I was 12. I didn't have the vocabulary yet for what I was feeling. Now I do. Now I'd call it the first moment I understood that in my family, effort that was visible, effort that happened on a field or in a pool, with an audience, with a scoreboard, was the only effort that counted. What I did in silence alone at a desk at 11 o'clock at night was invisible. I spent the next 6 years trying to make my accomplishments louder, trying to take up more space. It didn't work. The summer I was 16, I got into a governor's program for high school students interested in law and public policy. It was competitive. 200 applicants, 12 spots, a week-long residential program at Ohio State's Moritz College of Law. I had written my application essay 4 times. My history teacher had helped me revise it. I had mailed it myself because I didn't trust anyone else to remember. When the acceptance letter came, I screamed. Ashwin actually screamed. Alone in the kitchen, holding the envelope. My parents were in the backyard watching Caden practice his butterfly stroke in the above-ground pool we'd had since I was 8. I ran outside. I was crying. I held up the letter. My mother looked up and shielded her eyes from the sun. "What is it?" I told her. She said, "Oh, that's great, honey." Then she turned back to Caden and said, again from the top. That was it. That was the whole conversation. That night at dinner, my father asked Caden whether his coach thought he had a shot at state championships in the fall. They talked about it for 20 minutes. Training schedules, new gear, whether the high school pool long enough for proper practice. Nobody mentioned my letter. I ate my green beans, and I decided something quietly. While the conversation happened around me, I decided I was going to stop waiting for their attention to find me. I was going to build something so undeniable that eventually they would have to see it. It took me a long time to realize that eventually was never coming, not from them. I was a good student in a way that scared some of my teachers, I think. Not because I was difficult, I wasn't. I just cared too much. I stayed after class to argue about case studies in AP government. I read extra material just because I wanted to understand things completely. I applied to 31 colleges and got into 24 of them, including schools that my guidance counselor had put in the reach column. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because she said, gently, that those schools don't take many kids from Central Ohio public high schools. I got into Northwestern, full merit scholarship. The acceptance email came on a Thursday in April. I printed it out at the school library because our home printer was always out of ink. I held that piece of paper on the bus home and read it probably 15 times. My parents were both in the kitchen when I got home. My mother was on the phone. My father was watching a rerun of a Buckeyes game on the small TV mounted under the cabinet. I put the printout on the counter between them. My mother glanced at it, still talking on the phone. She held up one finger, and kept talking. My father picked it up, read it, set it back down. Northwestern, he said. That's in Illinois. Evanston, I said. Right outside Chicago. He nodded slowly. Long way from home? I know. Am I? Caden's going to Ohio State, he said. Like that was relevant. Like that was something I needed to be told. I know, I said again. My mother got off the phone. She looked at the paper. Northwestern, that's wonderful. She paused. Is that expensive? I got a full merit scholarship, I said. Full ride. Oh? She seemed to be processing that. Well, that's great. We'll have to tell your aunt. They told my aunt. They did not call anyone else. There was no dinner, no celebration. Nothing went on the wall. 3 weeks later, Caden's swim team placed second at regionals. My parents threw a backyard cookout and invited 12 people. I started packing for college 2 months early. Northwestern was the first place I ever felt like myself. I don't know how to explain that to someone who grew up in a house where they were seen. It's like I had been living in a house where all the windows faced one direction. And I had moved into a room with windows on every side, and suddenly there was light coming from places I hadn't even thought to look. My professors knew my name. My study group texted me when I wasn't there. My roommate the first week of school told me I was one of the most interesting people she'd ever met, and I spent 20 minutes wondering if she had me confused with someone else. I decided in my first semester that I was going to law school, that I was going to specialize in employment law, that I was going to help people who were being treated as less than what they were. I wonder sometimes where that drive came from. I finished undergrad in 3 years, LSAT 177. I applied to 7 law schools and got into all of them. I called home when I got into University of Chicago Law School. My mother answered. I told her. Oh, Chicago, she said. So you'll still be up there? Yes. That's close to where you are now, right? About 40 minutes. Well, that's good. A pause. Your father's at Caden's game. I'll tell him when he gets home. I said okay. I said goodbye. I sat in my apartment and stared at the wall for a while. Then I ordered myself a very good pizza, opened a bottle of wine I couldn't really afford, and called my best friend, who screamed loud enough that my downstairs neighbor knocked on the ceiling. I learned to find my celebrations where they actually existed. The bar exam was 2 days in July. I had been studying for 3 months. I had done over 4,000 practice questions. I'd given up a summer internship to make sure I had enough time to prepare. The night before the first day, I called home. My mother answered again. I told her tomorrow was the exam. Oh, right, she said. Good luck. Thanks. A brief silence. Then Caden got promoted at work. Did we tell you? He's a shift supervisor now. I said that was great. I said good night. I passed the bar on my first attempt, 91st percentile. I texted my parents. My father texted back 3 hours later. My mother called the next morning. She asked if I'd seen the news about the flooding in Texas. The firm hired me straight out of law school. Stafford and Crane, one of the top employment law firms in the country, headquartered in Chicago. I was one of 3 associates hired in my year. I worked 80-hour weeks and I loved it in the way you can only love something when you've been hungry for it your whole life. I was 28 when they told me I was on the partnership track. I was 30 when they told me I had made partner. The celebration was a dinner at a restaurant in River North that I had looked up beforehand and confirmed was the kind of place that required a reservation made 2 months in advance. My colleagues were there. My best friend flew in from Boston. My law school mentor came with her husband. My family was not there because I had not invited them. I want to be honest about that. I had thought about it. I had held my phone and stared at my mother's contact information for a long time. And I had thought about every time I'd done this. Called, told them something that mattered, listened to the silence on the other end, and I had put my phone away. I was done setting a table for people who never showed up. What I didn't know was that my cousin Petra had seen my LinkedIn announcement. Petra and I had always gotten along. In that way, you get along with family you don't see often enough to fight with. She had texted me a genuinely warm congratulations. I had texted me a genuinely warm congratulations. I had thanked her. I thought that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. 3 weeks after the partnership announcement, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I was between meetings and exhausted, and I had 17 emails waiting. I answered. It's your father. I hadn't heard his voice in almost 2 years. I said nothing for a moment. Then I said, how did you get this number? Petra. Of course. What do you want? There was a pause, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, we heard about the promotion that you made partner. Yes. That's, your mother and I were very proud. And there it was. That sentence, the one I had waited for my whole childhood, the one I had worked my entire adult life either trying to earn or trying not to need. And hearing it, at 30 years old, from a man who had texted me a thumbs up emoji when I passed the bar, I felt nothing. Less than nothing. I felt the specific emptiness of a thing arriving so late it had lost all meaning. Okay, I said. We'd like to see you. We thought maybe we could come to Chicago, take you to dinner. I don't think so. Ellie. His voice cracked slightly on my name and I noticed it and I felt very tired. We know we weren't. We know things could have been different. We know that. Dad. I kept my voice completely level. I have a meeting in 4 minutes. I need to go. Can we talk about this? Can we just? I'll think about it, I said because it was easier than the truth. Goodbye. I hung up. I stood in the hallway outside my office for a moment. Then I went back to my desk and opened my email and answered 12 of the 17 messages before my next meeting. I was very good at compartmentalizing by then. Years of practice. I changed my number 2 weeks later. I want to be clear about why. Not out of anger, not in a dramatic gesture. It was practical. I had been thinking about it for a while. My old number had accumulated a lot of connections I didn't need, and I had been meaning to switch to a local Chicago area code anyway. This was just the final nudge. I texted the new number to exactly the people I wanted to have it. Petra was not on that list. I felt a little guilty about that for about half a day, and then I reminded myself what she'd done, and the guilt went away. I should talk about Caden. He is not a villain. I want to say that clearly because I know how these stories go. The favored sibling becomes the symbol of everything wrong, and sometimes that's fair, but in my case it isn't. Caden didn't ask to be the center of my parents' world. He was just a kid who liked swimming. And somewhere along the way, our parents decided that his swimming mattered more than my everything else. That was their failure, not his. We are not close. We never were, not really. After high school, we drifted into parallel lives that almost never intersected. He works in facilities management now, back in Columbus. He got married a few years ago. I sent a card but didn't go to the wedding. That was around the period when I was most actively choosing my own peace, and being in a room with my parents for 4 hours didn't fit into that. He reached out to me once, about a year ago on my birthday. Just a text. Hope you're doing well, sis. Happy birthday. I wrote back, thanks. Hope you're good too. That was it. Maybe one day there's a conversation to be had there. Not yet. 6 months after my father called, I got a letter. An actual letter, handwritten, on my parents' home stationery, forwarded through my old firm address, which is a matter of public record. My mother had tracked it down, apparently. I stared at the envelope for 2 days before I opened it. She had written 4 pages. I'm not going to transcribe them here because they're private, and also because the specific words don't really matter. What matters is the shape of it. The acknowledgement that they had gotten things wrong. The explanation, not excuse, about how they had convinced themselves that academic achievement didn't need celebration the way athletic achievement did. Because it spoke for itself. Because they assumed I knew how proud they were because Caden needed the visible support more than I did. That last part was the one that sat with me longest. He needed it more. Maybe that was true. Maybe Caden, for reasons I don't fully know, needed the cheering section in a way that I didn't, or that they assumed I didn't. I was self-sufficient from such a young age that maybe I had inadvertently convinced them I didn't need anything from them at all. I have thought about this a lot, with an actual therapist whose name I will not share but who I will say has been one of the most important people in my life for the past 4 years. I do not use that insight as an excuse for them. Understanding why something happened is not the same as accepting that it was okay. But it gave me something, a framework, a way of seeing them as people who made choices, rather than as forces of nature that I simply had to survive. I saw them again at my grandfather's funeral 8 months ago. My grandfather, my father's dad, had been the one person in my extended family who consistently, quietly showed up for me. He had driven 3 hours to attend my college graduation when my parents hadn't come because Caden's regional swim meet was that same weekend. He sat in the bleachers in the sun for 4 hours, and he cheered when I walked across the stage, and I had wept in a way I didn't fully understand until much later. He died in March, 87 years old, in his sleep, which is exactly the way he would have wanted to go. I flew home for the funeral. My parents were there, of course. I had known they would be. I had prepared myself. Or I thought I had. I had a therapist, a plan, a hotel reservation, so I didn't have to stay at the house. My mother saw me first in the parking lot of the church. She stopped walking. Her face did something complicated. "Ellie," she said. "Hi, Mom." She hugged me. I let her. It felt strange and familiar at the same time. The way old clothes feel when you find them in a box. Recognizable, but belonging to a person you used to be. My father was standing a few feet away. He looked older than I remembered. He was holding his hat in both hands. "Hey, kid," he said. "Hi, Dad." We went inside. We sat through the service. I spoke about my grandfather, and I meant every word, and I cried in front of 200 people and didn't care at all. Afterward, at the reception at my aunt's house, my parents found me near the food table. My mother had brought a casserole, which felt both utterly ordinary and somehow important. My father poured himself a cup of coffee and stood next to me for a moment in silence. Then he said, "He always talked about you, your grandfather. Every time I called him, he'd bring you up, whatever you were working on, whatever case you'd just won." I looked at him. "I didn't know that," I said. He was proud. He paused. "He used to say, 'That girl is going to change things.' He said it a lot." I looked down at my coffee cup. "He came to my graduation," I said, "when you didn't." My father was quiet for a long moment. "I know," he said. "I know he did." We didn't say anything else for a while. Eventually, my mother joined us, and then my aunt came over, and the conversation became about logistics and casseroles, and who was driving where, and the moment passed. But something had shifted slightly, not fixed, not resolved. Shifted. I flew back to Chicago the next morning. I had a full week of work waiting. 3 depositions, 1 client intake, a brief that was due Friday. On the plane, I opened the Notes app on my phone, where I keep a running list of things I want to remember. Things I've figured out slowly, over years of trying to understand my own life. I added one more. You can understand someone without forgiving them. You can forgive someone without returning to them. You can grieve the family you didn't have while still building a life that's genuinely good. I looked out the window. Chicago was coming into view below. The lake, enormous and grey, and beautiful. The skyline I had learned slowly, and now knew the way I know my own hands. I thought about my grandfather who drove 3 hours and sat in the sun and cheered. I thought about my best friend who flew in from Boston for a dinner at a restaurant she'd never been to, for a job title she only half understood, just because it mattered to me. I thought about the wall in my parents' house full of things I wasn't on. And I thought about the wall in my own apartment which I have never tried to fill. I don't need a wall. I know what I've done. I was there for all of it. The plane landed. I took a cab to my office. I ordered a good sandwich and answered my emails and did my work. I am not waiting for anyone anymore. I haven't been for a long time. There's a moment I keep coming back to. My grandfather, 80 some years old, sitting in metal bleachers in the July heat for 4 hours just to watch me walk across a stage. He didn't complain once. He brought a bottle of water and a folded program, and he cheered when my name was called, and I could hear him specifically over everyone else because he meant it. My parents were in Columbus that same day watching my brother swim a race that had no bearing on his future, his career, or anything that would matter 5 years later. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I say it because it's simply true, and the truth of it taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. What we choose to show up for is a statement. It's a declaration of what we value, made in action rather than words. My parents told me they were proud of me many times over the years. But they showed me consistently that my pride was mine to carry alone. And the thing about carrying something alone for long enough is that eventually you get very, very good at it. You build the muscle, you stop needing someone else to hold the other end. I think about the version of me who was 12 years old, standing in front of that wall counting photographs. That girl was not broken. She was paying attention. She was learning something hard and true about the world. That recognition doesn't always come from the people closest to you, and that waiting for it will hollow you out if you let it. The smarter move, the harder move, is to decide that your work is worth doing regardless of who sees it, to develop the kind of integrity that doesn't require an audience. That's not a lesson anyone sat me down and taught me. I had to arrive at it myself through years of studying alone, celebrating alone, grieving alone, through choosing over and over to keep going anyway. That persistence. The decision to keep building even when no one is watching and no one is clapping. That's the thing that actually made me who I am. Not the grades. Not the bar score. Not the partnership. The choice, repeated daily, to not stop. And the moral dimension of it matters too, even if I couldn't name it that way at 12. My grandfather showed me what it looks like to love someone by showing up. My best friend showed me. My mentor showed me. None of them owed me anything. They came anyway. That kind of decency. The quiet, unglamorous kind that doesn't announce itself is what I try to practice now. In how I treat my clients, in how I show up for the people I love, in what I choose to put on my own wall, which is nothing, because I don't need it anymore. My parents are getting older. I don't know what the next years look like. I don't know if there's a conversation still ahead of us or if the distance has simply become permanent. What I know is that I'm not angry, I'm not waiting. I live in a city I chose, in an apartment I love, doing work that matters to me, surrounded by people who actually see me. That's not a consolation prize, that's the whole thing. My grandfather knew it before I did. He drove 3 hours to tell me without using any words at all.